Oh hey, it's Emily and I'm finally getting a chance to actually sit down and film this environmental book tag. So it was created by the founders of the X book club. So this book club focuses on reading texts by experts and people who are very familiar with certain topics and are kind of important to that topic, and they kind of go on different themes and pick a couple of books around that theme. So this theme for their first round is environment, and so they chose these two books, and I have read one. I'm in the process of reading the other. So they have created a kind of a tag to go along with this theme. I was so excited to be tagged by Kim. I was very excited by these questions anyway, and so when she specifically tagged me, because I think she remembered that the environment and climate change is a huge passion of mine. So I was very excited that she tagged me, and I'm very excited to do this tag. I haven't prepared a ton, so we'll see how this goes. So I'm just gonna jump right into the questions. The first one is, what is your favorite book cover with nature on it? So I'm gonna have to, I didn't prepare this one. I'm also not around my bookshelves, so that also makes it more difficult since I'm at home and not kind of with my normal books and bookshelves. I will see if I can think of something and put an image here of a book that I like with nature on the cover, and I'll see what I can come up with for that one. The second question is, have you read a fiction book where climate change was a theme? If not, are there any on your TBR? So I actually have a separate video. So I have a separate channel. I haven't posted on it in a while, but I will be turning back to this channel as well. I have a separate channel about climate change, and on there I actually posted a separate TBR of both nonfiction and fiction books about climate change that I would like to read. So the short answer is yes, I have an entire set of books that I want to read that center around climate change. I'll link both of those videos below if you're curious. And the other thing I'll mention about this is that, so I haven't really talked about this much on my channel, so I'm currently reading with my family one climate change fiction book, and we've just been reading it very, very slowly over the course of a long time. So we're actually reading New York 2140 by Kim Stanley Robinson, and this is one of the books that I actually mentioned in the video I just referenced, and this just kind of follows the lives of people in New York in 2140 after it's kind of flooded over essentially, and it's just kind of them surviving in a New York ravaged by climate change. And so that one has definitely been interesting. I'll talk more about it once we actually finish it. But that was one book that I'm actually currently kind of sort of in the middle of with my family. We're more than halfway through actually, but it's been very slow going. The third question is, are there any books set in the polar regions that you want to read or have read? So there definitely are some non-fictions about the polar region that I want to read, so that will be in the non-fiction books about climate change video that I just referenced. As far as fiction books, I think most of the ones that I can think of that I'm excited about that are set in polar regions are like polar fantasies. And Jade from JD Ray Reads has an entire list, so she runs Polarathon, I think that's what it's called, that focuses on, I think she tends to read middle grade fantasies set in polar regions, and her TBRs for that one, or her recommendation videos for those, are all sound super interesting to me, so I'll see if I can find one of those videos and link it below. But middle grade polar set fantasies definitely appeal to me. Some of those sounded so much fun. So I think Frostheart is one that randomly comes to mind by Jamie Littler. So there definitely are a whole set of just like fun fantasies set in the polar regions that I am excited to read. So I hope that answers that question. The next question is, what are your opinions on the relationship between book consumerism and the environment? Should people buy fewer physical books to help minimize deforestation, for example? So this one I did a little bit of research, not much. I want to do more research on this to kind of see the numbers. From what I can tell from a brief search, and I'll put some information below on this to kind of give a little bit more context. It seems to me that it's complicated is the answer, as with so many things. So there are different factors involved. So as far as physical books, obviously paper is involved there, and that can definitely add up, obviously. My understanding is that a lot of those tend to be areas, like those trees tend to be grown in areas that are specifically set aside for like fast growing trees, and then once they're cut and used for paper, more are planted and they're kind of quick growing trees that can kind of cycle through relatively quickly. And so that's something to consider. Another thing you have to consider with physical books is the transport of actually physically producing the physical copies of a book and transporting them around the world. So that also is part of it. One of the things that one of the articles I talked about too was that, at least with physical books too, kind of the carbon stored in the tree, because it hasn't necessarily, well, it would be interesting to kind of actually trace the carbon from the tree and whether or not it actually, how much of that was actually maintained and can still kind of be stored in the physical thing that is the book, and what that process is like. So that was part of what the article I was looking at was talking about. And so all that can add up. Of course, e-readers aren't free of environmental costs. There's obviously the cost of making the e-reader, and that can be an intensive process in terms of just the things that are needed to actually physically make that. And of course those also need to be transported around the world. Of course, once you actually have that, like the initial upfront creation of environmental costs is kind of in the upfront, and then of course after that you can click some buttons. You obviously need to continue to power said e-reader, which is also part of the cost there. That's very difficult to kind of factor in. So you need to continue to power it, but after that, other than powering it, you can click a button and get another book. And so that, at least kind of the investment in terms of environmental cost, is up front. But of course it also can depend on how often you change e-readers or get a new e-reader. How many physical books do you have? Do you use your library? Do you go to used bookstores and bookshops? And so that can definitely also affect how much environmental impact you have if you tend to get physical books. And so it really can just depend on the individual, how many physical books they read, where they got them from, did they get them from the library, used bookstore, or how many, where did those books come from in terms of transportation. And of course with e-readers, it can just depend on how many books you read as far as whether or not one is more environmentally destructive than the other. So it depends. But I'll see if I can leave some more information below if you're interested. So the next question is, what role do you think books and reading has in regard to educating people about the environment, and do you think it's the most effective way to teach people about environmental issues? This is an interesting one, and of course again the answer isn't necessarily clear-cut. I think it for sure needs to be part of a strategy, and in terms of education, is it the most effective way? So that's kind of hard to answer, and I will say that I read these books about this topic a lot, but that's also because I am interested in this topic, I'm passionate about this topic, I chose my career to be around this topic, and so I'm kind of self-selecting to pay attention to this literature. And so, the more interested I am, the more I educate myself, the more I want to continue to educate myself about environmental issues. And so it's effective for me because I seek out this information and I can find the information that I want and then get that information. But as far as overall education, is it the most effective? I don't know. It is kind of altering or adjusting educational curriculum in schools a more effective way to teach students about environmental issues and kind of make them lifelong learners and people who pay attention to environmental issues throughout their life. And maybe that didn't necessarily come from a book or a textbook, maybe that came from hands-on gardening projects at school, or just different conversations they had with their teachers, or different units that teachers taught in school. So it's hard to tell if it's the most effective way, but it is for sure it needs to be a huge part of the conversation, because writing is definitely an important way to communicate about those things. It also kind of depends on the medium. So books might have a different audience than, for example, blogs or videos, or people who, for example, talk on YouTube about climate change. Those have different places in educating people about environmental issues. And so all of that is necessary, I think, and should continue. So the next question is, have you read a nonfiction book on climate change that you think we should all read? The Future We Choose, for one. So I mentioned this is one of the books that they have for this book club, and the one that I just finished is The Future We Choose. I thought it was fantastic, would highly recommend. I also read, trying to think of other ones I've read relatively recently. So I know another one that I read and really enjoyed was the book that Karl Pope and Michael Bloomberg collectively wrote. I did really enjoy that one. I had started to read Getting Back to Green, but I didn't get very far and didn't bring the physical copy with me, and that's one that I also want to read physically. So you know, I had started that one and was very interested, but haven't continued with that one. So I don't know if I can recommend the whole thing, but it was definitely an interesting start to what I had read. So those are at least a few that I can think of off the top of my head. The next question is, where is the most beautiful place in nature that you have read a book? Pics if you have them. So I'll see if I can put the picture here. I recently went to just kind of get out of town, kind of rent a cottage in the woods or in the country and just have a little bit of chill time. There was a hammock there, and so I just got to chill in the hammock and read and just kind of go around and hike, and it was amazing. So this is at least a recent one. So there's an example. And the last question, if you could live in any natural setting in a book, like the 100 Acre Woods, in Winnie the Pooh, etc., which one would you choose and why? That's an interesting one. So for a lot of the ones that I tend to read, the natural setting tends to be, at least with the fantasies that I'm thinking of, either the natural setting is like not very hospitable and it's part of the story of what's going on. So I'm thinking of like the Mistborn series where it's like ash and, you know, there's not really much of a natural world. Or, you know, maybe a forest is integrated into the story, but part of, you know, that forest is kind of a character in and of itself. And maybe that forest, at least in a lot of the ones that I can think of, with the forest being part of the story, it's not like a positive force in the story. It's like something that has gone bad, essentially, and the characters need to kind of save the forest or survive the forest. Or there are some worlds that I can think of that in general the world is cool, but the author doesn't necessarily describe a bunch of natural settings. So I'm thinking of like the David Bode trilogy, where we follow different parts of the world, and we follow, but they're mostly kind of in different cities and not necessarily frequently in different natural settings. The River of Royal Blood by Amanda Joy did have some pretty cool natural settings. The Graceland series did too. So maybe that could be my answer. They spent a lot of time in different natural settings, particularly in Graceland, but also in the other two books in the Graceland series, but particularly Graceland. They spent a lot of time in some really cool natural areas. There's also the island that the House in the Cerulean Sea is set on. That would also be a lot of fun. So those are at least some answers. But that's the last question, so thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to do this tag. I'd love to see any and everyone's answers to these questions. So yeah, feel free to do this tag and let me know if you do it or what your answers are to any of these questions. And yeah, again, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more bookish content. I'll leave my Twitter and Instagram down below as well. That's where I like to hang out. I'll also leave more resources for how you can support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.